Hello, it's Mr. Van Dong here with week 2, day 1. We've made it through an entire week, oh my gosh, of your math instruction for distance learning. And here we are diving into customary units of measurement. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about customary units of length and converting those distances. So please join me in your textbook on page 807 for Convert Customary Units of Length. This is lesson 2 in chapter 11. The bulk of today's understanding of our learning, the key concept is that you can measure the same length using different units. For example, I could tell you how tall I am in inches. I could tell you how tall I am in feet, which is what we usually do. I could tell you how tall I am in yards, but we don't normally do that, do we? Or I even could tell you what fraction of a mile I am tall. Now, that would be a strange thing to do. It'd be a very small fraction, and it would be difficult to understand how tall Mr. Van Dong is if we use such a big unit of measurement like a mile. So the type of unit of measurement that we use should be appropriate to what we're measuring. You're measuring something small like a pen, and you should be talking about inches, right? You're measuring something really far, like how long it would take to get across town somewhere. You should be using miles. So you have to use the right type of measurement for your task. Now, we're not super worried about that in this specific lesson. Today, we're going to be converting different types of lengths with different units of measurement. Now, you have to just memorize this. Wouldn't it be nice if there were like 10 inches in a foot and 10 feet in a yard and 10 yards in a mile? That's how the metric system will work. Well, that's not how this works. It's ridiculous, and it comes, I believe, from like old school English measurements is what this is from, and they don't even use this anymore, so I don't know why we do, but we do. Look at you, get to memorize them. These ones are going to be pretty familiar, especially the top two that we're going to be talking about here in a second. Knowing how many yards and feet are in a mile, you've probably never tried to memorize that before, and it's really mean numbers. The only reason I haven't memorized at this point is because I'm on like year 8 of teaching it or something like that, but they're ridiculous. And in general, that is what you need memorized. You do have to have those top 2 lines memorized. If you don't know how many yards or feet are in a mile, no stress. If you want to like go the extra mile and memorize that, then that's awesome. Maybe we'll even on the test give you an opportunity to earn a 4 if you can show us that you can go above and beyond with that knowledge. But anyway, let's fill out this chart, make sure that we have a clear understanding of how many inches are in a foot and all that good stuff right now. So a lot of you know, when you were doing this last week, your ruler, if you had a full-length ruler at home, is 12 inches, which is 1 foot. So most of us probably have 12 inches in a foot memorized already. Yay, that one's pretty straightforward. How many feet are in 1 yard? 1 yard is 3 feet. And one of the only reasons why we have that memorized tends to be because of football. Just some reason we use yards in football. It doesn't matter. Okay, now it's easier if you just memorize how many inches are in a yard, but if you don't have it memorized, you could figure it out, which is what this whole business today is about, is figuring out how many inches are in 1 yard. We have enough information to know this if we don't have it memorized. We know that each one of these feet is 12 inches. So in 3 feet, how many inches are there? Well, that's 12 plus 12 plus 12. So that's going to be 36 inches in 1 yard. I would memorize that if I were you. And lastly, everybody knows there's 1,760 yards in a mile and 5,280 feet in a mile, right? No, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that at all. I mean, I do, but it's kind of a silly thing to know. Oh, that's sloppy. It'll be okay. You can read it. So yeah, that's the yards and feet per mile. You'll need to know that for doing your homework and doing this lesson. As far as memorizing this knowledge for future tests and thinking about like being prepared for 6th grade, this is not an essential thing. It's nice to know, but these you got to know. These you have to have. The 1 foot is 12 inches, 1 yard is 3 feet is 36 inches, those parts memorized. Okay, now that we've gone over what the actual conversions are, let's read the first problem and do a couple examples together before I release you to work on the independent sections. Example 1 says, for many of the thrill rides at amusement parks, riders must be at least 48 inches tall. Chang is 4 feet tall. Is he tall enough to ride a thrill ride at an amusement park? So we know that you need to be 48 inches to ride this super awesome roller coaster. We know that Chang is 4 feet tall. Okay. Feet and inches, they speak nicely to each other, but they're not equal, right? So I need to, there's 2 ways to solve this problem. I can figure out how many feet tall you need to be to ride by converting 48 inches to feet, or I can figure out how many inches tall Chang is and compare that to inches. Now, one of the hardest things about this skill is figuring out if you should be multiplying or dividing. I don't like telling kids to memorize tricks for knowing if you should multiply or divide, because as usual, the emphasis in elementary school is a strong foundational knowledge of math and being able to think of anything in math as happening in the real world. So I want you to think about if you had something like 48 inches, which I don't quite have on my meter stick. I've got 39 inches, but we can imagine a length of 48 inches is going to be like this. To figure out how many feet there are, I would need to put those into chunks of 12, right? I could take those 48 inches and group them into 12s and figure out how many groups of 12 there are. And then if there's a fraction left over, figure that out too. That would be division, or just solving it with a picture. I would solve it with a picture if I was going to convert it. But if you recognize that that's actually 48 divided by 12 to get the number of feet, good on you, okay? But personally, especially 5th grade Mr. Van Dong, 5th grade Mr. Van Dong would be like, excuse me, you want me to do division? How about I do multiplication instead? Because you can almost always just do multiplication instead, especially on word problems. So in this case, if I'm taking 4 feet, every 1 foot is worth 12 inches. Every 1 foot is worth 12 inches. So that's going to be 4 groups of 12. 4 groups of 12 is multiplication, and I would much rather do multiplication. Usually kids feel the same. If you feel differently, if you're like, multiplication, I'd rather do division, knock yourself out. So I've got 4 feet, and I'm trying to convert this to inches. There are 4 groups of 12 inches in 4 feet because there's 12 inches in a foot. So I need to do 4 times 12. Now, if you want to stack it, that's fine. If you want to use the double-double method for 4s, 12 doubled is 24, 24 doubled is 48. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go. He's 48 inches tall. He can exactly go on that ride, right? What's the question again? Is he tall enough to ride the thrill ride? Yes, he's tall enough. How do you know? Because 4 feet is exactly 48 inches tall, and that's how tall you need to be to ride. If we had converted this to feet, we would have done 48 divided by 12, which would have been 4 feet. 48 divided by 12 is 4. So in either case, we could have solved the problem. All right? Turn the page. Give us another. All right, example dos. Convert 42 inches to feet. Well, now I can't do multiplication. Now I have to do it like this. All right, so I have 42 inches, and I need to convert it to feet. Every group of 12 is worth 1 feet. Now, again, Mr. Van Dong in 5th grade is going to not do division because he would have been terrified of it. I'd have been doing repeated subtraction. Remove groups of 12 from 42 to see how many whole feet you have, and then go from there. Now, if you're dealing with a larger number, like if we were doing like 1,000 inches to feet, you don't want to do repeated subtraction. And we would bust out our long division algorithms and do partial quotients and that sort of thing, which is what they want you to do in the book. And if you want to do partial quotients, again, knock yourself out. I'm going to do repeated subtraction. I'd rather do it that way. I also, for example, I don't have to do minus 12 here. I could do minus 24 because 24 inches would be 2 feet, right? Because 2 feet would be 24 inches if I double them both. So I'm going to start with, but we'll do repeated subtraction one at a time. So I'm going to take away 12, and so then I'll have 30 inches left over. So there's 1 foot right here. So here I've taken, every time I subtract 12, it's a foot. I'm going to take away 12 again. Don't forget to be careful about breaking things apart there, sharing, borrowing, whatever you would call it. All right, so I've subtracted 12 again. That's another foot I've taken away. There's 18 inches left. Minus 12 again. There's 6 inches left. I can't subtract 12 again. How many whole feet were there? 1 whole foot, 2 whole feet, 3 whole feet. There's 3 whole feet, and there's a remainder of 6 what? 6 inches. So is the answer 3.6? No, that would be how the metric system works. This isn't the metric system. Of course, it's not that easy. You can't just put 0.6 on the end of it because it takes 12 inches to make a hole. This is 6 inches out of the 12 inches it takes to make a hole. 6/12 is a half. You've got 3.5 feet, right? You can't put 3 feet remainder 6. There's 2 acceptable answers to this question. 3 feet, 6 inches left over, which technically might not meet the requirements of the question because it says to convert it to feet. So I don't know if we should be putting any inches in here. So in that case, we need to do 3 feet, 3 6/12 feet, which you could also write as 3.5 feet, or if you wanted to write it as a decimal, 3.5 feet. All of those are correct answers. Okay, how do you know that it's going to be 6/12? Again, every fraction, the denominator is telling you how many it takes to make a hole. It takes 12 inches to make a whole foot. So that's why our denominator was 12. In some cases, our denominator might be 5,280 if we're converting miles to feet. Our denominator, any leftovers we would have would be in a fraction over 5,280. So answer to this problem, 3 feet 6 inches or 3.5 feet. Those would be good answers. All right, there's a guided practice problem. There's 2 guided practice problems. You're gonna freeze me with the pause button, and you're gonna try those 2 problems, and then you're gonna come back and check your work against mine. So go ahead and do that now. And I've been unfrozen. That's so wonderful. Okay, thanks for unfreezing me. Thanks for finishing those guided practice problems. The first one was to do 60 inches into blank feet. So again, we're looking for groups of 12 in here. On a previous problem, I learned that 4 feet was 48 inches, and I'm going to use that knowledge right now. I'm going to take away 4 feet in inches right away. I'll make a note. That's 4 feet right there is going to be taken away. That's going to have 12 inches left over. That's another 1 foot. So that's a total of 5 feet right there. So 5 feet is 60 inches is the answer to that problem. And for number 2, it says 16 yards is how many feet? How many feet are in a yard? 3 feet are in 1 yard. So we need to break these. So every yard is worth 3 feet. So in that case, I've got 16 groups of 3. 16 groups of 3. 16 times 3, which I would just stack to solve to get 18, and then 30 plus 10 is 40. So for 48 feet in 16 yards with multiplication. You're going to now work on the independent practice pages and also the problem solving pages, front and back of the next 2. Hey, they didn't have us do any warm-ups with 1 mile being 1,760 yards being 5,280 feet. So be especially careful on those ones. Those ones are going to probably be the trickiest ones. This is, if you have internet access, this is a good assignment to check your work using Google. If you Google how, that last problem, how many feet are in 16 yards, it'll just tell you. Don't do that until you've tried out all the problems. Check your work with Google on this, especially on the conversions with miles. But don't use it to just do all the work, because Google doesn't need any practice. You do. Okay, so make sure that you're doing it like that. Notice the second section is making comparisons, which they also didn't have us practice. So let's talk about that for a hot second. So compare using less than, greater than, or equal to. So in the case of a problem like 12, we have choices. We can convert inches to feet and leftover inches to make a comparison, or we can convert the feet and the inches just to inches. But you need to make it so on either line of the comparison, there's only one type of measurement, so that you're comparing inches to inches or feet to feet, that sort of thing. Okay? When you see a decimal for 5.5 yards and you're looking at inches, you have to think of what's half of a yard in inches. So half of a yard in feet would be 1.5 feet. Half of a yard in inches would be half of 36 inches, and so on. So when you see those decimals, they don't play nice. So watch out when you see those decimals. They don't play nice with our conversion in the customary system. I think that's all I got for you. Remember that you should work on core math instruction for approximately 45 minutes, so you can take 45 minus the length of this video. That's how long you should spend working on the independent practice and the problem solving page. If you finish them both early, go ahead and move on to the next thing. Again, check your work with Google on this. Would be a good use of Google, as they say where I'm from. They don't say that where I'm from. Nobody says that. Don't say that. That's not a thing. Good luck, and I will see you tomorrow.